Jerry Adebayo was the kind of man who turned heads wherever he went. Tall, broad-shouldered, and always impeccably dressed, he exuded the confidence of a man who had conquered Lagos. His tech company, a rising star in the competitive industry, had made him a millionaire before 35. But what truly set Jerry apart was his ability to draw people in. His charm was magnetic, his smile disarming. Yet beneath this polished exterior lay a temper as unpredictable as Lagos traffic on a busy Monday morning. Those close to him knew how swiftly his mood could shift, though few dared to confront him about it. Growing up, Jerry was an arrogant and spoiled child who always got whatever he wanted, whenever he wanted it. His mother, Mrs. Adebayo, doted on him excessively, turning a blind eye to his violent tendencies, especially toward his siblings and classmates. One day he got into a fight with his sister, Angela, and nearly cut her hand off with a knife. Yet Mrs. Adebayo dismissed the incident, insisting he was just a child who would eventually outgrow such behavior. However, as Jerry grew into adulthood, those very tendencies only became a part of who he was. In the heart of Victoria Island, at one of the city's most exclusive fashion shows, Jerry first laid eyes on Miriam. She wasn't like the women who usually circled his world. Miriam Okoro moved with quiet confidence, dressed in one of her own designs, a bold statement of color and elegance. Her laughter rang like music, her poise undeniable. For Jerry it was love at first sight. He had always gotten what he wanted, and he decided Miriam would be no exception. But what Jerry didn't know was that Miriam had spent her entire life fighting for independence. She wasn't looking to be owned. Miriam Okoro had learned early that Lagos was no place for the faint-hearted. From her modest beginnings in Surulere to running a fashion label that now graced the covers of lifestyle magazines, she had clawed her way up. Every fabric she stitched, every design she sketched, represented her journey, a story of resilience, ambition, and self-belief. Miriam dreamed of expanding her brand beyond Nigeria, of showcasing African fashion on international runways. Love, she believed, could wait. Her brand needed her full attention. When Jerry approached her after the fashion show, his intentions clear, Miriam was polite but distant. She had seen his type before, rich men who thought money could buy anything. Yet Jerry was persistent. He sent flowers, invitations to dinner at the finest restaurants, and gifts that could rival royalty. Slowly, despite her reservations, Miriam began to see a softer side to him. He talked about partnership, about supporting her dreams. Maybe she thought this man was different. But even as they grew closer, Miriam couldn't ignore the flicker of temper she occasionally saw in Jerry's eyes. Jerry believed he was winning. Each date, each shared moment with Miriam felt like a step closer to making her his. Yet, a part of him simmered whenever Miriam spoke passionately about her business travels and plans to move abroad. "Why leave Lagos when everything you need is here?" he would ask with a forced smile. To him, Miriam's ambitions felt like a threat. Why wasn't she content with what he could offer? He had seen women change their lives for less. The first real argument came one evening when Miriam mentioned a potential partnership with a Paris-based fashion house. Jerry's face darkened. "Why do you need to go to Paris? There are designers here. Stay. I'll invest whatever you need," he said firmly. Miriam bristled. "My dreams aren't for sale, Jerry. I've worked too hard for this." The sharpness in her tone stung him. His temper flared briefly, but he masked it with a grin. "Of course, I'm only concerned for you." But inside the fire had started. Jerry wasn't used to hearing no. Rejection wasn't a language he spoke. He convinced himself that if he proposed, Miriam would finally realize how serious he was. Surely, a ring would make her see that she belonged by his side. Not just any ring, a diamond imported from South Africa, nestled in a velvet box. He planned the proposal meticulously, a private dinner at the Sky Lounge with the Lagos skyline glittering in the background. He invited close friends, believing Miriam would be too overwhelmed to say no in public. Miriam suspected nothing. To her, it was another dinner, another attempt by Jerry to impress her. Still, she decided to go. Jerry had been supportive in his way, and though she wasn't ready for anything serious, she respected him enough not to cancel. Dressed in a sleek gown of her own design, Miriam arrived at the lounge, unaware that the night would change her life forever. The evening sparkled with laughter, fine wine, and soft music. Jerry was in high spirits, charming guests and keeping Miriam close by his side. But as the clock struck 9, he clinked his glass for attention. The room fell silent. With a confident smile, Jerry got down on one knee and opened the velvet box. Gasps filled the room as the diamond caught the light. But Miriam's face froze. The weight of the moment pressed on her. She looked at Jerry, the man who wanted her, but all she could see was the life she would have to give up. The room waited. Slowly Miriam shook her head. Jerry, I can't. A hush swept over the gathering. Jerry's smile faltered. His hand trembled slightly before he stood, his face an unreadable mask. The night ended awkwardly. Guests whispered as Miriam quietly left. Jerry remained rooted, the rejected ring glinting under the dim lights. But behind Jerry's cold stare, a dangerous resolve began to take shape. If Miriam wouldn't choose him, he would make sure no one else would have her. Jerry sat alone in his penthouse, the city lights of Lagos twinkling through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The diamond ring lay on the glass table before him, a bitter reminder of the humiliation he had endured. His friends' shocked faces, the whispers, and worst of all Miriam's rejection replayed endlessly in his mind. He had given her everything: time, gifts, attention. How could she say no? The rejection gnawed at him. The temper he worked so hard to control began to boil over. His mind twisted her refusal into betrayal. She led me on. She embarrassed me. Jerry's hands clenched into fists. He had shown her love and she dared to turn him down? If she wouldn't be his, she wouldn't be anyone's. The thought grew louder, more convincing. The rage inside him smoldered, seeking release. Miriam returned home that night with a heavy heart. She hadn't planned for the proposal, nor the pain she saw in Jerry's eyes when she refused. But deep down she knew she had done the right thing. Jerry's love felt more like ownership than partnership. His constant attempts to control her dreams had been warning signs. Yet, as she sat in her cozy Lekki apartment, unease crept over her. Jerry hadn't called or messaged since the proposal. She expected anger, but the silence felt worse. Miriam tried to push the thoughts aside, focusing on her upcoming trip to Paris. Her dreams were finally within reach, but a shadow of fear loomed. What if Jerry wasn't done? Jerry's obsession grew by the day. Each time he thought of Miriam leaving for Paris, a surge of rage took over. She had chosen her dreams over him, but she had underestimated how far he would go. As he scrolled through Miriam's social media, watching her posts about her fashion line, jealousy turned to resentment.
One evening, Jerry drove past Miriam's apartment. The lights were on, and laughter drifted from inside. Was she entertaining someone else? The thought was unbearable. His mind twisted the scenario further. She had rejected him for another man. The humiliation burned anew. He gripped the steering wheel, his temper bubbling to the surface. Miriam spent the next few days preparing for her trip. The partnership in Paris meant everything to her. It was the opportunity she had worked for her entire life. But Jerry's silence weighed heavily on her. He wasn't the type to let things go. She considered reaching out, but something told her it would only make things worse. Her fears proved true when she spotted Jerry's car parked outside her apartment one night. She watched from her window as he sat there, motionless, staring at her building. The sight sent chills down her spine. She closed the curtains, locking her doors. Jerry wasn't just heartbroken, he was dangerous. The night was eerily quiet when Jerry returned to Miriam's apartment. His face was blank, his movements slow and deliberate. In his trunk sat a can of petrol. The rage had finally consumed him. If Miriam wouldn't share her future with him, she wouldn't have a future at all. He convinced himself it was justice. She had embarrassed him, disrespected his love. As the flames began to rise, Jerry stood watching the fire devour the place where Miriam had built her dreams. The inferno lit up the night sky, sirens wailing in the distance. Neighbors screamed, running for safety. Jerry didn't move. His heart beat steadily as the smoke thickened. In his twisted mind, the fire wasn't destruction. It was closure. But Miriam wasn't inside. She had left earlier that evening for a last-minute meeting. As she returned to see her home engulfed in flames, the realization hit her. Jerry had done this. Her life's work, everything she had built, reduced to ashes. But Miriam wasn't broken. She was furious. And she would rise from the ashes stronger than ever. Miriam stood frozen as the flames devoured her apartment. The sirens of approaching fire trucks echoed in her ears, but all she could do was watch. Years of hard work, her sketches, collections, and memories, reduced to smoke. Neighbors whispered and pointed, some offering words of sympathy, but Miriam barely heard them. The firemen worked swiftly, but the damage was done. The police arrived soon after, asking questions about what might have caused the fire. Miriam could hardly speak. Deep inside, she knew the truth. Only one person would want to see her dreams burned to the ground. Jerry. The realization shook her. She had underestimated him. What had started as a charming romance had turned into a nightmare. But Miriam wasn't one to crumble. She would rebuild. Jerry had taken her home, but he would not take her future. Jerry woke the next morning as if nothing had happened. The sun filtered through his penthouse windows, and Lagos bustled with life below. But deep inside he felt hollow. The fire hadn't brought him the satisfaction he expected. The image of Miriam's face, her look of determination and rejection, still haunted him. News of the fire spread quickly. Social media buzzed with speculation about the mysterious blaze in Lekki. But Jerry remained calm. No one would suspect him. He was too respected, too successful. Yet as he sipped his coffee, his phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number appeared on the screen. "I know what you did." Detective Aisha Bello had seen her fair share of domestic disputes. But something about Miriam's case felt different. The fire appeared intentional, and there were no signs of a gas leak or electrical fault. Someone had set it deliberately. When Miriam mentioned Jerry's erratic behavior and the public proposal rejection, Aisha's instincts sharpened. Jerry Adebayo, a man of status and influence, would be a difficult suspect. People like him rarely faced justice. Still, Aisha had built her career on taking down men who thought they were untouchable. She assured Miriam that the truth would come out. But deep down, Aisha knew this case would be far from straightforward. Miriam wasn't content to wait for the police. She needed answers. She needed Jerry to see that he hadn't broken her. With renewed determination, she walked into his office unannounced. Jerry's surprise quickly shifted to his usual confident smirk. "Miriam," he said smoothly, "I didn't expect to see you so soon." "I know what you did," Miriam snapped. "You think you've destroyed me? You think burning my home will stop me?" Jerry's face darkened for a moment before he recovered. "You sound paranoid. Why would I burn your apartment? Because you said no to me? That's ridiculous." Miriam took a step closer. "You don't scare me, Jerry. The police are watching you." Jerry's smile faded completely. The mask was slipping. "Be careful, Miriam. You're playing a dangerous game." But Miriam didn't flinch. She had seen the monster behind the charm. She wouldn't rest until everyone else saw it too. Jerry's confidence began to crumble after Miriam's confrontation. The police had visited his office for questioning. Though polite, their inquiries were pointed. For the first time, Jerry felt the walls closing in. He couldn't believe things had escalated this far. He thought the fire would be the end of it, a final statement. But Miriam's strength rattled him. At night, Jerry struggled to sleep. His temper, once simmering beneath the surface, became harder to control. He lashed out at employees, canceled meetings, and isolated himself. The whispers among his colleagues grew louder. His perfect image was cracking, and soon it would shatter. Despite losing everything, Miriam refused to give up. With the help of friends and fellow designers, she began rebuilding her life. A popular fashion blogger shared her story, and soon messages of support flooded in. Investors who admired her resilience reached out. But Miriam's focus wasn't just on her business. She wanted justice. She knew Jerry wouldn't stop until he was held accountable. With Detective Aisha's help, Miriam gathered evidence. Old messages, threatening voicemails, and eyewitness accounts placing Jerry near her apartment the night of the fire. Miriam had risen from the ashes, stronger and more determined. Jerry had tried to destroy her, but he had only ignited a fire within her that could not be extinguished.
Jerry's world was unraveling. His company faced scrutiny as rumors of his involvement in the fire spread. Business partners distanced themselves. He tried to maintain his composure, but Lagos society was quick to turn. The man who once commanded respect now faced suspicion and whispers. The final blow came when Detective Aisha arrived at his office with a warrant. The evidence had piled up. Security footage showing Jerry's car near Miriam's apartment, forensic reports linking traces of petrol from his trunk to the fire, and the threatening messages he had sent. As officers led him away, cameras flashed. Jerry Adebayo, once the golden boy of Lagos, was now at the center of a criminal investigation. The trial of Jerry Adebayo became the talk of Lagos. The courtroom overflowed with journalists and spectators eager to witness the downfall of a man who had once seemed untouchable. Miriam took the stand, her voice steady as she recounted the relationship, the rejection, and the fire that nearly cost her everything. Jerry sat across the room, his face expressionless. But his eyes burned with the same intensity as the flames he had set. Jerry's defense team painted him as a heartbroken man driven to desperation. But the prosecution presented undeniable evidence of obsession and arson. The case wasn't just about a fire, it was about power, control, and the consequences of unchecked rage. After weeks of testimony and deliberations, the court was packed as the judge prepared to deliver the verdict. The room was silent, the air thick with anticipation. Jerry's lawyers remained stoic, while Miriam sat with her head held high. The judge's voice echoed through the courtroom. Based on the evidence presented, the defendant, Jerry Adebayo, is found guilty of arson and attempted murder. Gasps filled the room. Jerry's face finally crumbled. The sentence was harsh, 15 years in prison. His empire had fallen. The man who once had everything was left with nothing. Miriam walked out of the courthouse to cheers and flashing cameras. But this wasn't a victory march. She hadn't fought just for herself, she had fought for every woman who had faced violence masked as love. Her story had become a symbol of resilience in Lagos. With Jerry behind bars, Miriam focused fully on her future. Her Paris partnership came through and soon her designs graced runways across Europe. The world now knew her name, not just as a survivor but as a force in fashion. Jerry had tried to burn her dreams to the ground, but from the ashes, Miriam had risen, stronger, wiser, and unstoppable. Paris had always been Miriam's dream. The city's elegance and charm were everything she imagined, yet Lagos remained etched in her mind. She had achieved what many thought impossible. From the ashes of tragedy, her fashion brand was now a rising star on the international stage. Her debut collection, aptly titled Phoenix, received standing ovations. But even amidst the applause, Jerry's shadow lingered. Some nights, she dreamed of the fire, of flames licking at the edges of her life's work. Though Jerry was behind bars, Miriam couldn't shake the fear that his obsession had left a permanent scar. Each success brought reminders of how close she had come to losing everything. But Miriam had no intention of letting fear define her future. She had survived once, she would continue to rise. Jerry had always believed he was destined for greatness. Now he woke up every morning to the cold, gray walls of his prison cell. The man who once mingled with Lagos elites now shared space with men who had lived hard, dangerous lives. Prison was unforgiving. But Jerry still had his pride. He kept to himself, quietly observing. Yet, when he stared at the peeling paint on the walls, all he saw was Miriam. She did this to me. The humiliation of his trial and the betrayal he felt festered. But he wasn't done. His mind worked tirelessly plotting. Jerry believed this wasn't the end of his story, there had to be a way back. While Miriam thrived in Paris, Jerry was making quiet moves from within the prison walls. He wasn't like the other inmates. His reputation still carried weight and influence came in many forms, even behind bars. Jerry began aligning himself with powerful figures inside. He offered legal advice to inmates with upcoming cases, gaining favor among the prison's most feared men. Slowly he built connections. Money still flowed from the remnants of his empire, bribes and favors ensured he wasn't forgotten outside the prison gates. Jerry's obsession with Miriam hadn't faded. In his twisted mind they were still connected. One day he thought, I'll finish what I started. Miriam's brand, Miriam Okoro Couture, became a sensation. Celebrities wore her designs and fashion magazines clamored for interviews. She became a voice for women's empowerment, sharing her story of resilience and survival. Her face graced covers across Europe and Africa. Despite her success, Miriam remained grounded. Lagos was still home, and after 2 years in Paris she planned to return. She wanted to open a flagship store in Victoria Island, right where it all began. The announcement sent shockwaves through the fashion industry and Lagos society alike. But Miriam's return would awaken old demons, some still waiting for revenge. The moment Miriam's plane touched down in Lagos, she felt a mix of anxiety and excitement. The city buzzed with the familiar chaos she had missed, honking cars, street vendors, and the rhythmic hum of life. But this time she wasn't the same woman who had left. Her homecoming was met with fanfare. The media celebrated her return, praising her for putting Nigerian fashion on the global map. Yet, behind the smiling faces and interviews, Miriam sensed the lingering whispers of her past. The fire. The trial. Jerry. But she refused to let fear dictate her life. This time she was taking back Lagos, on her own terms. Jerry heard the news of Miriam's return from an unexpected source, one of the prison guards who occasionally brought him information for the right price. "She's back," the guard whispered. "Opening a store in Victoria Island. Big plans." Jerry's grip tightened around his cup. After 2 years, the fire inside him still burned. Miriam was thriving while he rotted here. The humiliation he felt on the day of his conviction returned with full force. But Jerry had been patient. His alliances within the prison had grown stronger. And soon he would have an opportunity to remind Miriam that their story wasn't. Opening of Miriam Okoro Couture was the event of the year. Lagos elite gathered, celebrities arrived in sleek cars, and the media broadcasted the glamorous event. Miriam stood at the entrance, draped in one of her own designs, smiling for the cameras. As she cut the ribbon, the crowd erupted in applause. This was more than a store, it was a statement. She had rebuilt what had been destroyed. But as the festivities continued, a note slipped under her office door caught her attention. "You can rebuild all you want, but ashes always remember the fire." Miriam's hands trembled slightly. Jerry. The note haunted Miriam. She hadn't heard Jerry's name in 2 years. How could he reach her from prison? Had he orchestrated something from the inside? Detective Aisha, now promoted and still a trusted friend, paid Miriam a visit. "He's still locked up, but prison walls don't stop certain men," Aisha said grimly. "You should tighten your security." Miriam nodded, but she knew Jerry's threats were never empty. His obsession had once driven him to burn her life to the ground. What would he try now? Jerry had waited long enough. His alliances paid off when a planned prison transfer gave him an opening. A bribe here, a distraction there, and suddenly Jerry Adebayo was gone, vanished into the Lagos night. His assignment was to silence Miriam forever. The escape sent shockwaves across the city. The media went into a frenzy. Jerry Adebayo escapes prison, manhunt underway. But Jerry wasn't running. He had a plan. The city that had watched him fall would now witness his return. And Miriam, his obsession, his flame, would face the full wrath of his revenge. The city was on high alert. Detective Aisha led the manhunt for Jerry, knowing full well where he would eventually go. "He'll come for you," Aisha told Miriam. "We need to keep you safe." But Miriam had faced Jerry before. She refused to hide. She increased her security and remained visible, knowing Jerry thrived in fear. But deep inside, she knew Jerry wouldn't strike publicly. He was meticulous. He would wait for the perfect moment to make his presence known. Detective Aisha arrived minutes later with a security team. The blackout was no coincidence. "He's testing you," Aisha warned. "He wants you afraid." But Miriam wouldn't give Jerry that satisfaction. "Let him come. I'm not the same woman he tried to destroy," she said. Jerry, watching from a distance, smiled. Miriam had grown stronger. Good. The fire would be even brighter when it consumed her again. His plan wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about showing Lagos that Jerry Adebayo was still a force to be feared. The next few days were tense. Miriam's security detail doubled. Yet Jerry always seemed one step ahead. Flowers arrived at her store with a note, "From your #1 admirer." A cab driver reported seeing a man matching Jerry's description near her Lekki home. Miriam knew Jerry was playing mind games. He wanted her on edge. But each threat only steeled her resolve. The city had seen her fall and rise. She would not break again. However, one night as Miriam left a charity gala, she felt a presence in the parking lot. Turning sharply, she caught a glimpse of a figure disappearing into the shadows. Jerry had come closer than ever. Detective Aisha devised a plan to draw Jerry out. A high-profile fashion event was scheduled in Victoria Island. Miriam would attend as planned, presenting her latest collection. The event would be heavily guarded, but the security would appear minimal to lure Jerry in. "This ends tonight," Aisha said. Miriam agreed. "I'm done living in fear." Jerry, hearing of the event, saw his opportunity. In his mind, the fashion show would be the perfect stage for his final act. The woman who had embarrassed him would face him once more, this time on his terms. The venue sparkled with Lagos elite, cameras flashing as models walked the runway in Miriam's stunning designs. The air buzzed with excitement. But behind the scenes, tension gripped the security team. Miriam stood backstage scanning the crowd. She knew Jerry wouldn't be able to resist such a public spectacle. This was his style, a grand finale. As the final model walked, the lights dimmed for Miriam's closing speech. Suddenly the emergency exit doors burst open. A figure stepped into the spotlight, Jerry Adebayo. The crowd gasped. Jerry's appearance sent shockwaves through the audience. Some screamed, others froze. Security rushed forward, but Jerry raised a hand. "I just want to talk," he said, his voice calm, dangerous. Miriam stepped forward before anyone could react. The room fell silent. "Jerry," she said evenly, "you're done running." Jerry smiled, a twisted version of the charm he once wielded. "Oh no, Miriam. I'm just getting started." But this time Miriam wasn't alone. As Jerry took another step, armed officers swarmed him. Detective Aisha led the charge. "Jerry Adebayo, you're under arrest." Jerry didn't resist. His eyes never left Miriam's. "This isn't over," he whispered. Jerry's second arrest dominated Lagos headlines. The manhunt was over. Yet this time the trial wasn't about heartbreak, it was about obsession, escape, and terror. Miriam testified with unwavering strength. "Jerry Adebayo represents a danger that hides behind wealth and charm," she said. "But no woman should live in fear." The trial was swift. With overwhelming evidence and a city watching closely, the court sentenced Jerry to life imprisonment with no possibility of parole. As Jerry was led away, Miriam met his gaze one final time. This time there was no fear. Only closure. With Jerry gone for good, Miriam finally breathed freely. The fashion industry hailed her as a symbol of resilience. She expanded her brand across Africa and Europe, her story inspiring countless women. But Miriam knew her journey wasn't just about fashion. It was about survival, power, and reclaiming her narrative. She founded a nonprofit for women who had suffered domestic violence, using her platform for change. The fire Jerry set had tried to consume her. But instead, it forged her into something unbreakable. Years passed and Miriam Okoro Couture became a global powerhouse. Her designs told stories of pain, healing, and triumph. Paris, New York, and Milan welcomed her with open arms. Her Lagos flagship store remained the heart of her empire, a reminder of where it all began. The city had witnessed her fall and her rise. Now it celebrated her legacy. Jerry Adebayo faded into history, an afterthought in a story that belonged entirely to Miriam. Miriam stood before a packed auditorium in Lagos, accepting an award for her contributions to fashion and women's rights. Cameras flashed and the audience rose in applause. Her speech was simple but powerful. "From ashes we rise. From pain we heal. And from the fire we become unbreakable." The crowd erupted. Miriam smiled, knowing her story was no longer one of survival alone. It was a story of victory. Jerry had tried to burn her world to the ground. But Miriam had risen again and again, stronger than ever, a true phoenix. Despite Jerry's life sentence, whispers of his influence still echoed in Lagos. Some claimed he ran operations from his cell, while others believed his power had finally crumbled. Miriam paid no mind. For her, Jerry was a closed chapter. However, Detective Aisha wasn't so sure. Rumors suggested that Jerry had made dangerous alliances during his time in prison. One night, Aisha received a confidential call. "Jerry still has followers. Be careful. He's not done yet." Meanwhile, Miriam prepared for her next international show in Dubai, unaware that the past she thought buried might soon resurface in unexpected ways. Miriam's Dubai showcase was a triumph. The world marveled at her designs, and major investors expressed interest in global expansion. However, as she celebrated with her team, a delivery arrived, an unmarked package. Inside lay a single item, a burnt fabric swatch from her first collection, the one lost in the fire Jerry started. A note accompanied it, "Even ashes remember." Miriam froze. It had been years since any direct message from Jerry. Was this a bluff? Or had Jerry orchestrated something from within prison? The flames of the past flickered again, threatening the life she had rebuilt. Detective Aisha flew to Dubai after Miriam's call. "Jerry couldn't have sent this himself. But someone is doing his bidding," Aisha said. Miriam refused to let fear win again. But as news broke that two of Jerry's former associates had escaped prison, dread crept in. Could Jerry still command loyalty after all this time? Back in Lagos, suspicious activity surrounded Miriam's flagship store. Strange figures loitered nearby and anonymous phone calls disrupted operations. It seemed Jerry's fire hadn't been fully extinguished after all. Jerry, though confined, had nurtured loyalty through manipulation and promises. Two of his most devoted assailants outside the prison walls, Ade and Musa, were given a task to do with the help of the prison warder. The mission was to finish what Jerry started. Miriam's rising influence threatened to erase Jerry's legacy of power. For Jerry it was personal. His twisted sense of love and possession wouldn't allow Miriam to live freely. Ade and Musa began their plan, blending into Lagos underworld. Their target was clear: burn down everything she holds dear, including Miriam herself, leaving no chance for rebirth. Aisha urged Miriam to postpone her Lagos operations. "They're planning something. Let us handle it." But Miriam stood firm. "I won't run. Not this time." The grand reopening of her expanded Lagos boutique proceeded. Celebrities, politicians and influencers gathered, celebrating Miriam's journey. However, amid the glitz, Ade and Musa lurked nearby watching. The final phase of Jerry's revenge was about to begin. As fireworks lit up the sky that night, no one noticed the small flame flickering behind the store. The fire started small, almost unnoticeable, before roaring into a blaze. Flames engulfed parts of the boutique, and smoke filled the air. Security rushed to evacuate guests. Miriam, refusing to flee, attempted to save her designs. A beam collapsed, trapping her briefly before Aisha and the fire department arrived just in time. The boutique suffered significant damage, but Miriam survived. This wasn't just arson, it was a message. Ade and Musa watched from a distance. "She escaped again," Musa muttered. Ade grinned. "We're not done yet." The attack ignited a city-wide manhunt. Aisha intensified security around Miriam, determined not to let history repeat itself. Surveillance footage identified Ade and Musa. With help from Lagos top units, Aisha tracked them to a hideout. Miriam, recovering in her Lekki home, reflected on the fire. Jerry may be behind bars, but his reach still burns. She knew that until Jerry's grip was completely broken and her future would never be truly safe. Aisha led a nighttime raid on the hideout. Shots were fired. The operation was intense. Ade was caught, but Musa escaped during the chaos. Under interrogation, Ade revealed chilling details. "Jerry promised us a huge sum. He said the Phoenix must burn completely." Jerry's influence ran deeper than anyone suspected. With Musa still free, another attack was imminent. Miriam knew what had to be done. "If Jerry started this, I'll be the one to end it." With special permission, Aisha arranged for Miriam to visit Jerry in prison. Jerry looked older but smiled when he saw her. "Ah, Miriam. The Phoenix returns to the ashes." "This ends now," Miriam said coldly. "You've lost." Jerry leaned forward. "Have I?" "Musa's still free. The fire's still burning." Miriam stood firm. "You'll die in here forgotten. And I'll keep rising, higher than you ever dreamed." Jerry's smile faltered for the first time. Musa made his final move, targeting Miriam's newly acquired design studio. But this time Aisha and her team were ready. An intense standoff ensued, ending with Musa's arrest. The last of Jerry's loyalists had fallen. Miriam stood before her studio's entrance the next day. "No more fires," she whispered. "No more burns. Only brilliance." Miriam breathed a sigh of relief. The threat was finally over. With Ade and Musa captured and Jerry securely behind bars, Miriam felt free. Miriam walked through the charred remains of the design studio that Musa had tried to burn. The damage was minimal. This time, the flames hadn't consumed her dreams. "No more fires," she whispered again, this time with finality. Her team rallied behind her, eager to rebuild. For the first time in years, Miriam felt peace. Jerry's story had come to a quiet end. Hers, however, was just beginning. With the threats behind her, Miriam turned her attention to something bigger than fashion. She launched the Phoenix Foundation, an organization dedicated to supporting women who had faced violence and trauma. People turned out in droves for the foundation's launch event. Survivors shared their stories, and Miriam, standing tall among them, became a symbol of strength and hope. "This foundation," Miriam said during her speech, "is for those who rose from the ashes. We are unburnable." The applause was thunderous. Miriam had turned her pain into purpose. Detective Aisha's role in bringing down Jerry's network did not go unnoticed. The Lagos police force promoted her to Chief of Special Investigations. Miriam and Aisha shared a private dinner to celebrate. "To new beginnings," Aisha toasted. Miriam raised her glass. "To women who refuse to be broken." The two friends smiled. Their bond, forged in fire, was unbreakable. For years, Miriam had focused on rebuilding her life, leaving little room for romance. But at a Paris fashion gala, she crossed paths with Samuel, a successful Nigerian entrepreneur. Samuel wasn't just charming. He was patient, understanding, and respected Miriam's journey. Their connection was instant but slow-burning. Back in Lagos, they spent time together, exploring art, music, and life beyond the headlines. Miriam had thought her heart was too scarred for love, but Samuel's warmth proved otherwise. Miriam Okoro Couture expanded into New York and Tokyo. Her designs, known for their symbolism of strength and rebirth, dominated runways. But Miriam wanted more than global success. She wanted to inspire the next generation. She opened a fashion academy in Lagos, offering scholarships to young designers. "Talent exists everywhere, opportunity does not," she said at the launch. "We're here to change that." Her legacy extended far beyond fashion. She was shaping futures. Years passed. Miriam visited Jerry one last time, not out of fear but for closure. Jerry, older and diminished, barely recognized her. His influence had faded, his name no longer whispered in Lagos. "You don't haunt me anymore," Miriam said softly. "I came to tell you that you lost." Jerry said nothing. His silence was the only answer she needed. Miriam left the prison gates feeling lighter than ever. The last shadow of her past had lifted. Under the Lagos sunset, on a private beach surrounded by close friends, Samuel knelt before Miriam. "You rose from the ashes. You inspire the world. But I want to inspire a life with you. Will you marry me?" Tears welled in Miriam's eyes, not from fear or pain but from pure joy. "Yes," she whispered. The applause from their friends echoed across the beach. Miriam had survived the flames and now she walked into the light of a new beginning. The wedding of Miriam Okoro and Samuel became Lagos' event of the decade. The city's elite, international celebrities and fashion icons gathered to witness the union. Miriam's dress, a masterpiece she designed herself, symbolized her journey. White silk with golden embroidery resembling rising flames. As she walked down the aisle, every step felt like a triumph. The woman who had once stood among ashes now walked toward a future glowing with promise. When Samuel whispered, "Forever starts today," Miriam believed him with all her heart. Married life brought new adventures. Miriam and Samuel became partners in both life and business, launching initiatives across Africa. The Fashion Academy thrived. Graduates showcased collections internationally, crediting Miriam for giving them a chance. During a charity gala, a young designer asked, "How did you survive everything?" Miriam smiled. "I didn't just survive, I rose. And so will you." Her story had become a blueprint for resilience, showing the world that scars could be beautiful reminders of survival. Years later, Miriam was honored with a monument titled the Phoenix, symbolizing strength, resilience, and rebirth. Standing beside her husband and watching the unveiling, Miriam reflected on her journey. The fires Jerry set had tried to end her story, but instead they ignited a legend. In the crowd, young girls whispered her name with admiration. To them, Miriam wasn't just a fashion mogul, she was proof that one could rise again, stronger and brighter. With the sun setting over Lagos, Miriam whispered to herself, "From ashes I rose. And I will keep rising."